today's tutorial is for brown Irish soda bread. I actually got the recipe from this July and August issue of the Bake from Scratch magazine. It's all Irish themed. So I have the oven preheating to 325, and then I have my bread pan here that I've just greased lightly with butter. You can kind of see there. You can also use cooking spray. Just be sure that you are getting the corners, because that's the part where the bread's most likely to stick. So first we're going to mix our dry ingredients. So this recipe calls for 2 1/4 cups of whole wheat stone ground flour. I actually use just a little bit less than that, so just kind of a hefty 2 cups. I found that having a little less flour in this recipe gives me the texture that I wanted. Same thing with our all-purpose flour. It calls for 1 1/4 cups. I just use a little over 1 cup. The all-purpose flour is actually going to make the bread more fluffy. That's why we use something other than just the wheat, which is nice. In addition to our flours, we're going to add 1.5 teaspoons of kosher salt and 3/4 teaspoon of baking soda. So I've got those here. Then we just whisk all of our dry ingredients together. A large bowl is best here because all the ingredients are going to end up in this bowl. Okay, so I set the dry ingredients aside for just a second while we get the wet ones together. We're going to do 2 cups of buttermilk. I highly recommend getting whole buttermilk. I don't know why anything else exists, but this is the fat that's going to bring everything together in this recipe. So whole buttermilk. You want 2 cups. And then I've got 1/4 cup of molasses. This is what's going to add a little bit of sweetness to the bread. And then 1 egg. And then just whisk those together as well. So once that's all come together and you've got a nice caramel color, we're gonna head back over to our dry ingredients. And here we're gonna make a well. So what that means is just pushing enough of the dry ingredients off to the edges, having a little still on the bottom, and then you've got a nice hole here. You can see that. Then we'll take our wet ingredients and pour them into that well. So this is a really delicate dough, so we want to be really careful not to overmix. That's why we do this well method here. Then you're going to take your hand, that's going to be your best tool, and you'll use it like a claw, starting in the center, just kind of grabbing like this, slowly mixing everything in the center in, and once that is combined, moving along closer and closer to the edges until everything is combined, but be very gentle here. Once combined, you should be left with a fairly wet dough. It's gonna have some texture still, not runny, but wet. Then, once that's done, just take your spatula and we'll pour it into the greased pan. Take your spatula and spread it evenly all the way to the edges. Then this bread has a pretty soft crust when it's done, so adding a couple handfuls of steel cut oats, just sprinkling those over the top, that's going to give the crust a nice crunch. So we'll take our bread, put it in the oven at 325 for about an hour to an hour and 15 minutes, and I'll show you later how to use the instant read thermometer to check that it's totally done. Okay, the bread's been in the oven for about an hour and 3 or 4 minutes, and I've taken my instant read thermometer. You've got analog and digital versions of this, but essentially you just stick it into the middle of the bread and it's gonna slowly rise up, and once it gets to 200 degrees, then your bread is done. which mine did. So now we're gonna let it cool in the pan for 15 minutes. All right, now that it's cooled a little bit, we can take it out of the pan. So I like to take a knife and just run it along the edge to make sure there's no little bits that have stuck to the sides. There's one. Then you'll want a clean tea towel. This is a special trick with this bread that gets the crust really chewy. Take the loaf out of the pan. And by the way, I've had all of my loaves look a little bit different. It's okay if yours puffs out more than this. They tend to vary a little bit. So then just set that in the tea towel and wrap it up nicely. This is gonna take all of the heat and create a steam that really makes a nice crust. So that's all wrapped up, and we'll let it cool about another at least half hour before you unwrap it. Okay, now that our bread has sat for a little bit, we can unwrap it from the tea towel. And it is great warm, it's also great cooled. I'm gonna cut a slice here. Let you see. So this is kind of the texture you're going for. If there's more holes, that is totally okay too. Like I said, some of them rise differently than others. And I like to use Kerrygold salted butter on top. Spread a little on there. And it's ready to go.